What is going on, my friends? Welcome back to the Locks DFS NFL cash game breakdown for this Week 9 NFL slate. We are officially more than halfway through the season, and it's been a good year so far. 6-2 in cash games for me, or in terms of cashing double ups with my. I play one team in cash and run a few other 3-entry maxes. But yeah, I mean, it's been a good year so far. So hopefully we close out the year second half very, very strong. If you guys are not aware, I am at BuyHardy on Twitter. You can follow me there. I'm BuyHardy on DraftKings as well. So that's my name on both of those websites. Please give me a follow. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, it really helps us out a lot if you subscribe. Hit the like button. And if you do that and also leave a comment with your favorite cash play of the week, because this is the cash game breakdown, leave me your favorite cash play of the week, and you will be entered to win a free season pass from locksdfs.com. You can choose NBA if you want, even though this is an NFL video. If we do choose your name in the Thursday night video, we'll be choosing a name every single week until NFL is over. And yeah, if you win that pass, you can choose NBA, you can choose NFL, you can do whatever you want to do with that. But check us out right here. If you guys don't have a pass yet, locksdfs.com. That is where we'll be doing our full slate breakdowns, as well as all of our showdown breakdowns go up there on Sunday night and Monday night as well. So check those out. That's where we'll be posting our locks, values, grades, all that good stuff. And with that said, I think that's all I needed to say before the video. We will go ahead and talk about my team from last week. So here I was. Let's go ahead and run it down from the top. This was in the SPY, ended up cashing pretty well in it because of one Tevin Coleman down here. We'll get to that. We're going to go in order straight down the list. Deshaun Watson, I talked about in this video how there were a few guys that I was considering at different price ranges in terms of quarterback. Watson was just my favorite and the guy that I thought had the highest ceiling, highest floor. Loved the matchup, of course, against Oakland. Didn't get there for 300 yards passing, but still had a very, very solid game. Fournette just kind of landed there. I mean, of course I talked about Fournette in the video. I liked him. I wish I could have got to McCaffrey. Honestly, I knew he's pretty much matchup proof. But the build just did not allow me to get there this week. I knew I had to play one of Michael Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins. Ingram was my favorite tight end, so it just didn't work out this week for me to get to McCaffrey. So, and he's obviously way more expensive on this Week 9 slate. We'll be talking about that here shortly. Latavius Murray was a lock for me in cash games. Unfortunately, in a lot of my other 3-entry maxes, I did not go with him paired with Coleman, which kind of sucked because it pretty much kept me from banking with a lot of other really good builds. I had Cooper Kupp in one of my 3-entry max builds with Goff, and if I had Coleman in that build, I would have been looking pretty. But that happens. It was not a great process not going with Murray in some of my 3-entry maxes, but. Obviously he had an awesome game, and I wish I would have had a little bit more of him in GPPs. Only 52%, which only, but at 5.8K in that matchup was a really, really nice play. Stills definitely busted for us, but he was if I was playing this in terms of playing this lineup in terms of thinking about tournaments, I probably wouldn't have been too interested in Stills as GPP play just because the ownership was way too high. He was, of course, cheap, but 37% is just too much for a guy like Stills. Obviously, had big play potential, just didn't get there. 3 receptions, 22 yards. I knew I was going to play Michael Thomas or DeAndre Hopkins. Ended up not double stacking Houston and going with Michael Thomas. That worked out. I just felt so good about the volume I was getting from Thomas, and in the matchup that he was a pretty smash play for me, and the touchdown was awesome for him. Mike Williams, he had some great targets. Again, another great air yards game. Just didn't, he didn't kill you. At 4K, 9.9 doesn't kill you. He did fine. At least he caught those 3. He had a big 40-yard catch in the first half that really helped out a lot. But yeah, man, definitely unfortunate for him to not do more in that game. But pretty low scoring game, and what can you do about it? Evan Ingram was a guy that he was just ended up being my favorite tight end as I started to look more into the slate. Really wanted to get a piece of that New York Giants and Detroit game, and couldn't find a way up to Saquon. I talked about that a little bit with McCaffrey, kind of the same idea there. Just because of Thomas, I just couldn't find a way to get up from Fournette. So I could have dropped quarterback and made a few other changes, but I really wanted to play Watson. So I just kind of stuck on Fournette. I had Ingram. That's another guy I could have gone down from. And then let's get to Tevin Coleman, a guy who Addy put me on to on Friday night. Actually, I had not even looked at. Or actually, it was on Saturday afternoon before he was making Addy's action. And I was just like, wow, I'm shocked that no one's talking about this. Don't get me wrong. We got very lucky to get the game that we got from Tevin Coleman. Dude got like 13 or 14 touches, and scored 4 touchdowns. I mean, that is some extreme run good. He almost had 3 points per touch in this game, which means he probably had like 14 touches actually. But yeah, I mean, that said, the process was fine. You're getting that many touches for 5K in this matchup wasn't a bad spot. Like I said, just ran really good for him to run that hot. And obviously, having him at 3.7% ownership really moved me up in these GPPs. Going into the afternoon games, I was looking like a decent shot to cash GPPs, but not a lock. Obviously, that Coleman game pushed me over the edge. And that was massive. And then Chargers defense, they were just so cheap, and I knew they were going to be able to get a few sacks on Trubisky, so that was pretty much the whole process there. Ended up getting 2 turnovers as well, so, turnover prone Trubisky. Thought I could get a turnover, maybe 2, and then, like I said, 3 sacks or so, and that's enough for me for my defense for under at 2.3K. There are some interesting cheap defenses. I know to talk about defense in this video, but if you haven't noticed, I pretty much play a cheap defense every week and just look for the best potential there. Okay, moving into week 9. Let's do it. There are, looking at the Vegas totals, there are 2 games that obviously are standing out. I guess it's really just these 3 actually, and they're all on the afternoon slate. The 2 most targetable are the Seahawks, Bucks, and then the Lions and Raiders are both looking very interesting. And then you've got the Packers and Chargers, which also has a pretty high total. So those are the 3 games that are the most interesting. I think a lot of people have a ton of exposure to those late afternoon games, so don't expect to see a lot of locks early in the day. That said, let's go ahead and get into our favorite plays. So at the quarterback, we are going to talk about Russell Wilson here in a second, but my favorite for cash games right now is going to be Matthew Stafford, who, like I said last week, is just having the best year of his career. He's best in yards per attempt, best quarterback rating of his career both. Kerryon Johnson is still out, which is going to leave Stafford to likely pass the ball a little bit more, despite the Bevel offense that tends to lean towards the run. When Kerryon's been out, they tend to go a little bit more pass heavy. We saw that against Minnesota, and we saw a little bit of that last week against New York Giants. And Stafford has just looked really good. And Oakland gives up the second most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and there's just no real experience in their defensive back room. They traded their top cornerback last week, and it's just one of the best matchups you can get for opposing quarterbacks, anywhere in the league. Obviously, Stafford's priced up a bit now, which is tough. Wish I would have played him in some of these other weeks. Obviously, 6-1 last week was an awesome spot for him. Pretty much match Watson in that game. So, but yeah, it's definitely still interested in Stafford here. Love the floor, love the ceiling. Going on to the Seattle Bucks game, I think this is where the other spot where I'll be considering my other quarterbacks. You have Russell Wilson for 300 more. Obviously, to give you a little bit of rushing upside, potential to get in the end zone. He has 3 rushing touchdowns this year. But you always have to be a little bit concerned about Seattle just turning to the run so heavily when they get up in the game. That said, the Bucks do have the number 1 rush defense DVOA. And if Seattle isn't able to run the ball, they are probably likely to turn to Russell Wilson in the pass if the Bucks force him to do so. So it comes down to whether Winston can push this defense and Wilson has the highest team total of the slate. You love to see that out of your quarterback. I think the price is totally fine on him. Definitely like Wilson. He's someone I'm considering for cash for only 300 more than Stafford. If you want to go a little bit more cheap, you've got Jameis Winston here. Obviously, is definitely struggling as a passer. Didn't complete over 50% of his passes last week in what wasn't too tough of a matchup against Tennessee, and also threw 2 picks and fumbled twice. Lost 2 fumbles. Fumbled 3 times, actually, apparently, and lost 2. That is not going to help if he turns the ball over 4 times in this game. If he can't handle the pressure that Seattle will bring, it could be a very long day for Jameis Winston, which is why I am more likely to end up paying just that extra 1,000 or 700 to get up to Stafford or Wilson. That said, the Seattle defense has been ripped consistently for big quarterback games. I mean, even Matt Schaub last week threw for over 400 yards. And I think that Winston's going to have to pass a lot in this game, regardless of whether they feel comfortable about it or not. And this is an offense that has thrown the ball plenty. 41 attempts, 54 attempts, 43 attempts. Secondary for the Seahawks, by no means is like a matchup that I'm really concerned about. I think Winston was going to have to throw plenty in this game, and I think he'll have some success as long as he can handle the pressure and make solid decisions. So, also, let's mention the upside of possibly running. He hasn't rushed for a touchdown this year, but he did rush 8 times for 53 yards last week, which definitely helped out his floor. Lastly, if you're looking to get really cheap, Derek Carr is 5.5K on the other side of that Detroit game. They're going to have to probably pass a decent amount in this game. They also have a 26 team total, and Tyrone Williams is back in the mix, so that definitely helps out Carr a decent amount, and he's very cheap. So he's somewhat interesting as well. Okay, moving on to running back, where at the top we have two guys that are standing out in Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. Of course, they are way, way, way priced above these other two, and both should get considerable ownership. McCaffrey gets another tough matchup this week against a Tennessee front that is like top 3 in defense, rush defense DVOA. I think they might be second. That said, obviously McCaffrey is pretty much matchup proof. Even in a game where his team scored 13 points and got ran over, he still scored 30 fantasy points because he scored a rushing touchdown and got over 100 rushing yards. Dude is just an absolute monster, So regardless of the matchup, he's going to be in play for me. It's going to be really interesting for me to decide which of these two I'm going to play. Even with the value on this slate, I don't think you're going to get to both. Because they've been priced up so far. These top running backs have really seen their prices increase significantly. So there's really no way you're going to get to both. I think I prefer Cook for the slight value of it, and touch-wise should be about the same. Although McCaffrey is a little bit more talented, but man, Cook has been a beast, and he just has the best matchup that you can ask for. If we're getting him at lower ownership than McCaffrey, I really, really like that a lot. Kansas City missing Xavier Williams. They're missing Frank Clark. They're missing Chris Jones, all in the middle of the field. Two of them being defensive linemen, all three being defensive linemen. Best matchup for opposing running backs in the league for Cook, as I just said. I mean, including the passing game. Kansas City has been giving up a ton to opposing running backs in the passing game. We just saw that last week with Aaron Jones, which obviously Jones has lined up a little bit out wide or in the slot, and Cook isn't going to do that as much. But that said, still a nice spot for opposing running backs. Cook is pretty much a lock for 22 touches, I'd say, in this game, in pretty much every game. And of course, a Minnesota team that likes to run the ball and gets a matchup where you can run the ball with ease, they're going to give it to him a decent amount, I think. If Cook is going to be way less owned than McCaffrey, I just really, really like the spot. And we all know the way to beat this Chiefs team is to run the ball, and they can do that with Cook here. Moving on down to the mid-range, which there are other mid-range guys here, but the guy I'm going to talk about is going to be Aaron Jones. I like Jones a lot more, and I will be more insistent on getting him into my cash lineup if we see Davante Adams out. He has led the team in targets over the last few weeks with Davante Adams out. So that's definitely, it's tough to target any of these receivers for the Packers right now because they spread the ball around so much. But Jones has been a consistent piece of that passing offense. So Jones is a true game time decision on this afternoon slate. So we don't really know, but if we do find out, before that Sunday afternoon test for Adams, if he's going to play or not, then Jones would get a plus or a minus based on that. He played a 63% of the snaps last week, had 20 touches. And I'm really optimistic about his role going forward. Obviously, the Chargers is also a very solid matchup. Just saw David Montgomery run all over them last week. They're giving up 22.8 rushing yards per game, ranks 23rd in the league. And it's a 24th run defense DVOA. That's pretty much, the Chargers in general struggling as an entire team, an entire organization right now. I think that Jones should definitely have his way against this defense. Obviously, there is two very standout values on the slate, and the number one is going to be Jalen Samuel. So you just plug in and like we just heard today that James Conner is going to be quite doubtful. We know that Benny Snell is out. Not that Benny Snell would have mattered all that much because Samuels would still be a lock in that situation for me. But basically, the report out of practice was that Samuels took all the first team reps, as you can see right here, on Friday, and he's going to start a running back with Conner out, or Conner's doubtful. So I mean, most likely he's going to be out. Benny Snell's already been ruled out. I mean, there isn't much to say here about the matchup other than that it's actually pretty good. The Colts are ranked 29th in run defense DVOA and are 24th in line yards. When someone is 4K and they're expected to play pretty much all the running back snaps, you just play them. So lock in Jalen Samuels this week. Don't think about it. I mean, everyone's going to tell you that, but I'm going to tell you that too. Also, Mark Walton is very cheap. He played 87% of the running back snaps last week, and he got 6 targets and 11 carries, even in a game where Miami trailed for the entire second half, or most of the second half. He might not be necessary in your builds with Samuels drawing the start and only 4K. I just don't know if you're going to need 2 4K running backs in your builds. It doesn't mean Walton isn't a good play, though. Although Miami has a 19.75 team total, the game is expected to stay relatively close. Miami's at home. And, Walton was totally expected to take over these running back duties when they traded Kenyon Drake. And he claimed that role quickly last week with 14 touches, but he did get six targets. So they played on Monday night, which is leading to this low price. I think if this was a game that played on Sunday, we would see Walton price closer to 5.2, 3, 4K, somewhere in there. So we're getting a little bit of a discount on him. It is a pretty good Jets run defense, although they are going to be missing CJ Mosley still. And that is a massive bump down for them. But the Jets are still third in run defense DVOA and fifth in stuff rate. So it's not the best matchup. Obviously, Samuel has a much better matchup and is a much better play. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the running back plays this week because Samuel is just a smash play, and then you know that you're going to be playing one of the high-priced guys in Cook or McCaffrey based on your preference. However, wide receiver is a position that is very deep this week and is probably going to make or break this slate in terms of cash games, because I think that a lot of the ownership in cash on running backs will be very condensed, whereas these wide receivers could be very spread out. So at the top, I am going to first be talking about Mike Evans here at 7.2K. As you can see, 29 targets over the last 2 games is obviously massive. But what's more interesting to me is his end zone targets this year. He has 11 end zone targets, but he only has 3 red zone touchdowns. He's definitely due for some regression there, and I think that the Bucs will be forced to throw, not only being down in this game, but also just based on the Seahawks secondary that is not very good. They're 19th in pass defense DVOA this year. Trey Flowers is probably going to be covering Mike Evans, and he is PFF's 98th cornerback against receivers this year, and he's coming off a neck injury. So I think Evans should probably have his way against Trey Flowers. Obviously, Shaq Griffin has been pretty much stationed on one side of the field, and he would be a little bit of a tougher matchup. But that seems very unlikely because they stay stationary on one side. So unless Evans goes to his side, I don't really think you're going to see much Shaq Griffin on Evans. Godwin is obviously solid as well. I love Jameis, and Godwin in the slot has a pretty nice matchup against Jamar Taylor's 101st PFF grade, 101st PFF rating out of all cornerbacks. Godwin is a guy who would he's getting volume just like Evans is, and there's no reason why Godwin can't be a cash play, a GPP play. You can double stack up this game if you want, if you feel that confident about Jameis Winston. Totally fine with Godwin. I think. If we see Evans being extremely chalky, I'm not sure how this, I'm not sure how this ownership is going to go on these Buccaneers wide receivers, but if we see Evans come in a lot higher owned than Godwin, then I would be more likely to play Godwin, to be honest with you, and just kind of pivot off of that. Both are awesome plays. Going down a little bit further in the mid-range, there are 2 guys I am really interested in here. The first one is Allen Robinson at 6.8K. Philly has, a lot of people don't believe in pass funnels and all that, whatever, that's fine. But the truth of the matter is that Philly has a top, believe 5 rush defense, and they lack any semblance of a pass defense, which should shift the Bears to rely more on the passing game. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky. By the way, Mitch Trubisky is 5K, so if you do believe in Chicago being able to pass the ball, if you do believe in Mitch Trubisky, he's very cheap this week. I don't know if I'd be going there unless you're playing a lot of GPP teams, but just saying. When the Bears look to pass, they're turning to Allen Robinson, and the Eagles have given up over 100 yards to 7 different receivers already this year. Robinson is just a very, very solid floor play with upside in this matchup. I think he's a solid play that could go overlooked here in this mid-range at wide receivers that I just really love the floor in cash games for. But of course, I'm not big on the price, of course, because we're seeing him at his highest price so far this year, despite coming off a 5 for 62 game. Obviously, the matchup is awesome, but it's just the price is a little bit high for me. But I'm absolutely going to be considering him in cash games. But the guy that is going to be, I think, will be get a lot of attention this week. Like I said, I'm really confused about where this ownership is going to go at receiver, and I'll be interested to read around a little bit on Sunday morning and see where we're at. But I think Keenan Allen could go overlooked as well. He's popping up in the air yards by low model. He has 21 targets over the last 2 weeks, despite dealing with a hamstring injury. Last week, that hamstring injury, if you watch that game at all, really looked to be, it was a combination of the hamstring injury and the Soldier Field grass that really seemed to mess with Keenan Allen last week. Just like slipped and fell multiple times despite it not being wet. It was very strange. But I think that the hamstring being back home should help him out a little bit. The Packers are going to have 5 touchdowns to opposing slot receivers this year. Allen obviously runs most of his routes in the slot. He has a 26% target share and is only 6.4K, which is obviously very intriguing. Henry has taken a little bit away from that target share, but Keenan Allen's still going to be the guy think you can pretty much count on him for 10 targets a game for the most part. And, we've seen slot receivers, again, tear up this Green Bay defense. Even though I don't love this Chargers team, they've got a 22.75 team total. It isn't too bad. The over-under is up 3 points. They're expected points to be scored in this game, and Allen should be a massive part of that, especially if the Chargers get down in this game and can't run the ball. Before we get to these cheap receivers, I do want to mention, of course, that because I love Stafford, obviously I love his receivers as well. So Galladay is a 7.7K. What's interesting about him mostly is that we've seen Oakland give up massive chunks of yards to receivers all year long, and that benefits Galladay in his big playability. Obviously, the price on DraftKings might be a little bit tough to pay for, but he has such a high ceiling in this spot. Oakland could be crushed by both of these receivers, even all three of these receivers. It's tough to really pin down which one I like the most because they all have such good individual matchups with these terrible Oakland corners. But Galladay is definitely someone that is in play as my wide receiver 1. Also, I definitely have a lot of interest in. Did I pass him? Yeah. Marvin Jones Jr. Definitely not getting the same floor out of Jones Jr. that you're getting in Galladay. But the Raiders are getting up to everyone this year, and Jones certainly still has a ceiling. We've seen it with 13 targets and 4 touchdowns, but it's just a little bit more fluctuating in his targets this year. And one thing that I think is hurting Jones a little bit as a secondary passing option behind Galladay is the emergence of Danny Amendola. Since he's returned from injury, he's looked to really gain a rapport with Stafford. He's got 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. He had that early season injury, starting to come back from that, starting to gain a little bit of a rapport, and the Raiders have given up 685 yards, 5 touchdowns to slot receivers this year. I keep wanting to say slot corners. That's a really good number for Amendola. I actually don't have the number on his red zone targets. I would actually be interested in knowing that. So that's something you guys can look up on your own. Just Google red zone wide receiver targets and you'll find it. But yeah, I mean, especially if he's someone that is getting targets in the red zone, I would definitely be interested in Amendola. And I am interested in Amendola regardless. I think the price is good. Right above him, we have DJ Moore, who is also a guy who is, I think he might be tops. Yeah, he's tops in the air yard model with 27 targets over his last 2 weeks. 27 targets over his last 2 weeks. 3 weeks, sorry. And he draws a pretty nice matchup against the Tennessee defense that isn't very good against boundary receivers. Obviously, Mike Evans tore up this defense last week on the outside for 11 catches, 198 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, that's Mike Evans. We're talking about DJ Moore here. It's not the same. But Moore obviously has a solid rapport with Kyle Allen that has not resulted in a big game yet. This could obviously be the spot against Tennessee, although the game might be a little bit slow. Derrick Henry, they might just run it with Derrick Henry, not trust Ryan Tannehill, whatever. Moore still should be able to find his way to 7 or 8 targets here, and obviously being in the air yards model gives him a big bump in terms of that. Also, I don't know if it's really a bump for Moore, but what's interesting is Adoree Jackson, who's clearly Adoree Jackson, who is clearly the Tennessee's top corner, is going to line up against Curtis Samuel for the majority of the game, based on the sides that Moore and Samuel line up and the sides that Jackson lines up on. So that would benefit Moore as he draws a little bit of a softer matchup than Samuel here. Last guy I'll mention real quick, and I'm not super excited about this play, but just in terms of opportunity, Pascal should have a little bit more of opportunity with T.Y. Hilton ruled out. The total in this game isn't very high. I'm guessing it's one of the lowest on the slate, but season high 92% of snaps last week for Pascal. He's going to be needed on the field for pretty much every snap in this game with no Hilton. So just in terms of opportunity at 4.1K, Pascal makes a lot of sense. The problem is that he's going to be lined up for most of the time with Joe Hayden or Steven Nelson unless he gets an inside. So I definitely think Pascal has a low floor, but in terms of the opportunity you get at 4.1K to get a number 1 receiver for a team is definitely a little bit interesting. And let's talk about 2 more guys at tight end. There's only going to be 2 this week. I know I usually talk about these tight ends, but there's really only 2 I'm considering this week. First one is Darren Waller. Waller's really interesting to me if I decide to pay up. If I pay for Stafford and then pay up for Galladay or Jones or Amendola, whatever I decide to do there with those Lions guys, I would definitely like to have Waller to run it back to, hope that Waller can do some things. How much is I honestly don't even know. How much is Tyrone Williams? 5.9K. He's not bad either. I don't know what Slay's status is, if he's questionable or whatever. He sat out last week, so. But yeah, Waller at 6.3K, massive target total. I believe he leads all tight ends in target percentage for his team. Part of that due to Tyrone Williams' injury, of course, but 8 targets, 5, 8, 14, 7, 8 on the season so far. So you got to love that from your tight end at 6.3K. And he's just such a good run back option for those Detroit guys, and such a great game for these guys. Waller led the team in routes last week, and I think Williams being healthy might actually benefit Waller, as it could draw coverage to Williams and let Waller run a little bit more free in the middle of the field. Lastly, I'm pretty much going to be, like I said, pretty much deciding between these two because Cameron Brate stayed priced down here at 3.1K. He got 6 targets last week. I believe he also got an end zone target. Practiced fully on Friday, so I'm not worried about his injury designation. He's a matchup-based play. Just, like I said, we talked about both those Tampa Bay receivers against the Seattle secondary. Tight ends have also done very, very well against them as well. Brate played 67% of the snaps last week. He's in the highest total of the week. It's a very good game to be in on, and I think Brate could definitely be a part of this passing offense going forward, as he played so many snaps last week and got 6 targets. So if we can get 6 targets again at 3.1K, if we get an end zone target at 3.1K, I'm very in on that. But just know that if you play these cheap tight ends, you're definitely asking for a potential 2-catch, 20-yard game, and you're just left out. So yeah, that's pretty much gonna wrap it up. Obviously, like I kind of said, I actually didn't write down in my notes. I realized this right after I started recording that I didn't write down my favorite stacking options. But let's go ahead and I know what my favorite games to play are. So if we want to go with this Tampa Bay game, this one pretty much writes itself. You can play Wilson or Winston. Let's go with a Winston stack on this one. We can go with someone like even Chris Carson. I know the matchup isn't great, but look, Carson is going to be getting. Actually, only got 1 target last week, which I did not actually know that. But yeah, generally he's going to be involved in the passing game, so we can play him instead of Wilson, which gives us a good amount of touchdown equity there. And then we can, double stack it up, or we can go something like Evans and Brate, something like that. Or you can go something like this, although Lockett for his target share is very expensive, in my opinion. And DK Metcalf, same thing here. He got 2 touchdowns last week, but still has not been getting really a ton of targets. So yeah, it's kind of tough to stack this game up because of those, but I think Carson would be probably my favorite run back option, because I do think that Seattle's able to control the game, even against a tough run defense. Hopefully they are able to move the ball on the ground. Yeah. So that's one game I'd be interested in stacking up. Moving on to Detroit-Oakland game, which again, I think this game will have a ton of exposure to. We move to, a ton of ownership will be in this game, is what I was trying to say there. Moving over to receivers, obviously you can do like a Golladay Amendola stack here, run it back with Waller. You can run it back with Tyrell the Gazelle. Oops. You can run it back with Tyrell the Gazelle here. You can even do something like this. I would go with Golladay, and then go with here actually something a little bit crazy is even to go with Josh Jacobs, who is priced up, but Oakland is a home favorite here, and he has a very, very safe touch floor, of course. So definitely a little bit of interest in Josh Jacobs, even in cash games, because of his huge floor. He plays like every snap for them. And something like this, although it is negative correlation to go with these two, so I might end up going with like a Williams instead. Great to see that he doesn't have an injury designation, full participant in Thursday practice. That's great to see. With a Liz Frank injury, I actually really like Tyrone Williams this week. I would like him more if I knew about Slay's status, which I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't seen anything about him this week, and I forgot to put it in my notes leading up to this video. And lastly, there was one more game I thought that I wanted to look at. I think it's this Chargers game. Devontae Adams is questionable, which really throws a wrench into things in terms of stacking this game. So I might just leave you guys with those 2 game stacks. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. If Adams is out, obviously Rodgers is solid, but oh my goodness, Rivers is 5.1K. I did not know he was that cheap. That is really cheap for Phillip Rivers, man. You can do this though, something like this. Rivers, And I do like Hunter Henry, even though he's right there with Darren Waller. Henry is not bad. Something like this is honestly pretty solid to me. Totally, that is an extremely affordable Charger stack. Like the upside you get out of these three guys is awesome in a game where Chargers are going to have to chase. And I think that the Chargers should also have some success against the Packers. So yeah, I mean, I like all those guys. Those would be my three interesting game stack options. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you guys have tons of success this week. I hope that I can come through with another win and not make some terrible decisions like I did in week 7. I'm still thinking about how bad that week was for me. Let's get another week 8 week. Let's get another Tevin Coleman. And thank you guys all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment for a chance to win that free season pass. Follow me on Twitter @ByHardy. And good luck this weekend. I will see you guys back here next week. Peace.